Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Inside the Mind. I am Crash, your host, and today we've got WeeLilPancake of the newly formed Death's Orchestra. How you doing, Pancake?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I just finished watching some friends play Counter-Strike, so looking bright. And your future as well in CSC is looking pretty bright, but we're going to go ahead and kind of go over this past season. I mean, your journey was a pretty unique one to watch, right? You don't see someone be cut mid-season and then be picked up by another roster in the same season. You don't see that very often. So how difficult or easy was that from a personal perspective for you?
I wouldn't say it was necessarily difficult. I'd say it was more of a learning process. Only because this is my first season on. It wasn't even like a mid-season cut. It was pretty late in the game. We had like just the double headers left, or like a week before the double headers. So it was definitely, I was only playing for a short time. So it's definitely a learning process to try to get used to a whole new team in such a short amount of time.
That makes sense, right? Obviously, coming into a new team with that little time remaining in the season is going to be difficult. And obviously, do you have any kind of advice for maybe a new player that comes into CSC and goes through something similar? Like, is there anything that you would want them to know going in? Or
Keep communication open, I'd say. I definitely don't get upset. Like, I know I was a little bummed about getting cut, but it's stuff that just has to happen. Like, you learn. If the team has to be better, if you get the shit end of the stick and it's just because of like your MMR, it's understandable, but just don't get upset. Keep your head up. If you get picked up by another team, that's great. Just immediately your focus is on trying to vibe with them and make sure that everything is going to work out.
fair enough. That's pretty decent advice. I've had a couple of seasons like that, but they're very few and far between. Most players in CSC don't go through something like that, so your experience is very unique, and being able to take that into the next season is going to be huge for you guys. But I guess one of my other questions was there a difference in leadership specifically between the two teams that you would like to highlight? Anything stick out to you?
Very. So the IGL of Cow is Sentinel, as we all know and love. He's great. As a recruit IGL, you're going to be dealing with a lot more shit of like people not knowing how to play the game, people learning the game in a different sense of just running pugs. I think he did very, very good. We practiced all the time. Like, it was a very, like, he knew what we needed to do and we would work on it. I'd say joining Yokai, it was a very big 180 of like, they just vibed, like they didn't really have plans. It wasn't like a big we practice team. So it definitely was it was a big change. It was a big 180 between like constantly being in contact with teammates and being like, oh, I'm available tomorrow, I'm available the next day, to just we're gonna vibe and we're gonna do what we can. It definitely was a big change for me, and I think that definitely threw me off a lot of like, I'm expecting to like, all right, I'm in the team now, what are we doing, what's the plan, what should I be practicing, and not having that kind of input like Sentinel would give. So it was definitely a big change.
Do you plan to change that style of leadership? Obviously, taking over the captain role within the team.
I definitely think practicing is important. Making sure that your team has a good vibe, of course, is very, very important. You don't want people clashing with people all the time. Like, that's just a given. But we definitely will be practicing. If I'm not saying 7 days a week, I'm not making it into this big thing. But we do have to make sure that we work together as a team. We understand each other. And I think that is something that is very, very, very important for a team to succeed in any way.
Absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. Practice is super, super important, especially in a league that you wouldn't expect it to necessarily be as competitive as it is currently. I mean, both of the teams have made it to the finals this season. We're super, super into demo review, super, super into outside of regulation scrims. So it's what you got to do if you want to win. And another question that I got for you is, do you plan to be the IGL within this team, or is there someone you're looking to pick up in free agency?
I don't know if I'd be. Not only am I new to CSC, I'm technically very new to Counter-Strike. I have just a little over 300 hours in this game. I'm definitely very quickly picking up a lot more being in CSC to where, like, worst case scenario, we don't have an IGL. I am comfortable doing it, but I do know that there are other players out there or on the team that have a higher interest in me, than me in IGLing. So it's definitely something that we still have to kind of keep an eye out for and plan before the next season starts. callouts.
You heard it here first. Death's Orchestra is looking for some big brains out there. But, you know, obviously we're just looking for some insight, especially going into next season, right? But to kind of circle back to the this season conversation, past season, what was the environment in Cal like leading up to the big cut?
It was definitely, in not a negative way, it was definitely high strung. Like, we knew things needed to change. At first, it was like our communication as a team, like, were we giving enough call outs, things like that, and we worked on that until that was solid, and then it was this that we needed to work on, then it was this, and then it got to a point where it was kind of like, it felt like we were at a standstill in what we could change to get better. Like, we were excelling on communication, post-bomb, like post-plant spots, like, we were doing great, but it was just, what's the next step? Like, what do we have to do now? And it was definitely a very stressful time. So me getting cut, I'd say specifically me getting cut was a little bit of I was taken aback by it, but I think definitely changes had to be made, and granted, they had how many weeks left of the season, so they might not have seen the change that they wanted to, but again, they were adding in new people at the end of a season. How fast, like, how much time do they have to really get that team going? I think definitely it was high strung, it was stressful, people were stressed, but I think change was definitely needed in that sense, and it's understandable.
Absolutely. And obviously, you know, struggling is not easy. It's never fun to lose, especially that many times, right? So things are going to deteriorate as solutions begin to fade out and not work. So, and especially going from a roster like Cal onto a roster like Yokai Cafe was definitely, there was no real change. I mean, obviously there was a change in leadership, like you mentioned, but there wasn't really a change in result. And were there any changes that were made on YC when you came in, or any changes at all that you saw led to the continuing losses in the roster?
For the last couple of game days I was in, I would say necessarily no. I knew when I joined we were looking at a couple of new execs here and there for certain maps, but it wasn't enough. I don't think, because I was only there for a little bit, so I can't really speak for the entirety of the team. I can't speak for the rest of the season, but the days that I were there, I don't know if it was it's the end of the season downhill vibe, or if it was scheduling issues, but we had a couple of execs planned out, and we never had the time to practice them. We never had the time to go over them at all. We really only met up for the games themselves. So I just think that it backtracking a bit, the lack of practice that we had, I think, was really what would have made us better as a team.
I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially, you know, and it's really interesting how two teams had different approaches, but still had relatively the same results. That is actually pretty interesting. So you kind of elaborated on it a little bit earlier, but I kind of want you to expand on what it's like for a new player to come into a new team from an old one. What's that process like? What is it like up here, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think my situation is a little bit more unique as far as when the day that I joined Yokai, I wasn't, again, I'm going to preface with schedules were filled, people were busy, but I wasn't really greeted with the, hey, new player, let's run a practice night so we can go ahead and get used to working together. I joined the franchise about 2 hours before a match night. Yeah, it was about 2 hours before. I think it was like the Tuesday before Halloween or something. But it was definitely like are we going to run a practice beforehand, considering I'm new? And I wasn't really hearing anything back. So I will say I think my situation is a little bit more unique than most people's will be. But definitely keep your head up, try to communicate. If there's any problems, talk to the captain, talk to the AGM, talk to the GM, and just kind of make sure that you're comfortable, that you are understanding of how the team works, and talk to them. And if your position is typically what somebody else plays, see if you guys can swap. Maybe they're comfortable in a different position. Kind of just talk with your team and make sure that what's going on is what's going to work best for everybody. Like, yeah, say the four of them already have a good setup going. the fifth person is going to join in, they have to adapt as well. It's not just your job to adapt, it's the entirety of the team.
Gotcha. I mean, that's super. That's really, really insightful. So, do you feel like you made the right decision accepting their offer that late into the season, or would you rather have continued your season as a free agent?
I did have my ups and downs the last couple of weeks of the season. Of like, was this a good idea or not? In retrospect, I think I'm completely okay with being in this franchise. If someone is unhappy on the team, if people don't like how this is going, speak up. Like you're gonna be miserable on a team if you don't like, oh, this person has an attitude I don't go along with. Like, talk to, you guys have GMs and AGMs and captains for a reason. Talk to them, let them know. I think that with my situation, I'm definitely happy on DOA now, because I think I'm in a role where now I have kind of like, I'm not the new person. Like I'm here, I'm stepping up, and if there's gonna be changes that need to be made, there's gonna be changes. I don't mean to be a hard ass, but that's just how it's gonna have to happen at this point. And so we're gonna be okay. We're gonna be good.
That's good, dude. That's good to hear. Speaking of changes, what's the plans with the team? You got to tell me because I know Sentinel and I know Noah, they're both cooking up super teams right now, according to rumors. What are your big plans going into the season 13 off season and draft? You got anything lined up right now?
I have a couple of things lined up. I can't say much, unfortunately. I do think we have a couple confirmed not coming back, maybe. So there are definitely going to be roster changes made on the sake of we need a team. Regardless of how it's gonna happen, there are going to be big changes to the DOA recruit team.
Anything you're looking for specifically? I know you mentioned the big brain, but any boomstick holders perhaps?
I have a couple of specific people in mind. I'm going to keep them lock and key for now, but they know who they are, and we are in talks for the new season. I will say we will be kicking ass. That's all I'll say.
I would love to see your franchise be competitive in the next season. And, Sentinel's throwing really good offers at Milky and Brian, so you better pick them up. I know Colty's going to be an FA next season, so start looking to pick up some pieces. Start looking to pick them up early. But, that kind of concludes the, obviously, with your position as a captain within the franchise, I don't imagine you'll be looking to go anywhere. But are there any franchises you would consider offers from?
If Sentinel paid me enough money, I'd go back to Cal.
You'd go back to Cal?
If he paid me enough money.
Their jerseys are pretty good. I won't lie. Their jerseys are pretty nice.
I know. Maybe that's what we got to do now.
How are you feeling, like a scale of 1 to 10? Like, I guess to kind of round us out, like, how are you feeling, scale of 1 to 10, on the rebuild within Death's Orchestra under the new identity?
I'd give us a good confident 10. I think now with the change in GM and with who we have kind of helping out rebuild the entire franchise, I think changes are going to be made. I'm not saying anything against the former GM, not saying anything bad, but I definitely think who we have right now will be putting in the work to change what we need to. So the franchise being rebranded, I think, is a really good kind of wipe the slate clean, and we're going to go into season 13 with a really good start.
Yeah,
so
Yokai Cafe was not notorious for winning championships.
No, not at all.
Yeah, that basically rounds us out. I got nothing left for you. Is there anything you'd like to say before we close this thing down?
Nothing much. I think I said everything I had to.
That's good. That's good to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for watching. This has been Inside the Mind, episode 6. WeeLilPancake, and y'all have a wonderful night. Be safe.